Dr. Ameri, we are honored to include you as part of Moraine Valley Community College's Arab Heritage Month program. For those who don't know, Dr. Ameri is a renowned scholar, respected author, tireless community organizer, and an institution builder. She is the founding director of the Arab American National Museum and co-founder of the Palestine Aid Society. So we're going to spend a bit of time with you today, Dr. Ameri, learning more about your journey and your memoir, The Wandering Palestinian, yes, which I have to say I thoroughly enjoyed reading. It was honestly one of those books that I had a hard time putting down. So I want to say thank you to you. Thank you for sharing your personal and your political story with all of us. I'd like to turn the floor over to you. So if you can just say a little bit about, what inspired you to share your life story.
If I have to be honest with you, when I started writing this, I was not thinking of writing my own memoir at all. But it's an interesting juncture in my life. I worked with Palestine Aid Society for a long time as a full-time staff. I was one of 2 or 3 at the most, and we did amazing work. Then 1993 came and Oslo was signed agreement, which to me was a way to pull the rug from under the uprising in Palestine. And I was I have to say I was devastated. And I just couldn't bring myself to inspire people. If you want to lead an organization, you have to be able to inspire them, to tell them. And I couldn't bring myself to do. So I decided to take a year off. And at the same time, I have just gotten a divorce from somebody I really loved and respect a lot, Abdin Jabara, who I learned a lot from him. He is an important member of the community and he's a wonderful person, but our life did not work as a husband and a wife. So that was devastating. So I decided to take a year off. And this is the interesting part, I think, is I was wondering, why did I take the Oslo so hard, personal? It was personal to me. It was not political event that happened and you move on. And I start to reflect on my life is like, what make us who we are? What make us choose a certain path instead of the other? I have PhD in sociology. I taught at Winston University for a while. I could have chosen that path as a career rather than Palestine Aid Society. So I start to reflect about my life and events that happened in my life that I think shaped me. And I remember, I think one of the most powerful memory I have, in the Arab culture, storytelling is part of our life. People get together after dinner and sit and tell story. When people come to visit, they tell story. And I remember every time people came to visit my family, they talk about the loss of Palestine. And I remember seeing my father as a child talking about Palestine, and his other men talk about it and actually shed tears. And, men in our culture don't cry. And that really left my impact. And I want to hear more about their story. And then I came of age in the 50s and 60s in the Arab world. And I always say we had our 60s, the West America had, and we had our 60s, and the issues were the same. So I started writing events that happened in my life that I thought shaped me. 48 with my father's story, 1956 when they attacked Suez Canal and Nasser, 1967, I was always an activist. So this Wandering Palestinian is volume 2 of my memoir. The first one was the Ascent of Jasmine, coming of age in Jerusalem and Damascus. And, I started jotting down stories and sharing them with my friends. And they kept saying, oh, you should write these, you should publish them. And then I got a job with Access and got involved with Palestine Aid Society. And these were in a drawer collecting dust for many years till I retired and dug them out and started looking at them. And I decided to write them down because, number one, the story of Palestinian to me is the story of South America, is the story of African American in the United States, is the story of Native American. I mean, the content may be a little bit different, but oppression is the same. And solidarity, we should express solidarity with all people who are oppressed, and our struggle is the same. So that's one thing. The other thing is to talk about Arab American. I came here and actually got politicized or activist. I came politicized. I was an activist before by Arab American who was active in the civil rights movement in a union anti-Vietnam War. I didn't know that. I didn't know that Arab American. I learned a lot about Arab American. They helped me. And they were Arab American immigrants from Lebanon, Civil War, from Palestine, 67, and they were organizing, they were Yemeni organizing, Iraqi organizing against Saddam. So I found a niche, and I was impressed by these people and by the Arab American community. And I decided, we should write this down because other people tell our story and they tell it from their perspective. We have to tell our story from our own perspective. We are not perfect individuals. We have our struggle with adjustment, with personal struggle, but we need to tell our own story, especially Arab American women, because if I think about it, I'm an Arab, I'm a Palestinian woman, I'm a Muslim. I grew up in an Arab world. So for many American, I'm the embodiment of everything evil in this world. And that's what they know. If you're Arab, if you're Muslim, if you're Palestinian, then you are the scum of the earth. And I think that books like these is really maybe give an idea to the world of who we are.
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm so glad that you only took a year off and came back to the movement, because I remember how devastating Oslo was to our communities. I remember what a shift and what a break in our political spirit that was. And many organizers didn't come back. They were devastated, right? But you made your way back, and you continued to organize, and you continued to inspire. And I'm so glad that your friends, again, this is the book. I am so glad that your friends encouraged you to narrate and to journal and to document your journey and the journey of our communities. And I really appreciated how you also tied in the struggles and the connections and the collaborations that our community fostered and engaged in with other oppressed and marginalized groups. You started to touch on that a little bit. What was that like for you? When you came here, you initially felt isolated and lonely when you came here, but then you found your way, with the Arab Community Organizing Group and other oppressed and marginalized groups.
I came, as I said, I came of age in the Arab world in the 60s and early 70s when we knew about the civil rights movement. We knew about it before. We knew about Vietnam War and the devastation or the impact on it. But when I came to the United States, I really did not realize. I understood theoretically about the struggle of African American, but I came to Detroit, a city that was very much impacted by racism in this country. And I get to learn about Arab American, and I saw the connection. And in Detroit is a labor union city. I saw Iraqis. You talk about Arab nationalism. Then I saw Iraqi who were displaced by Saddam oppression. I saw Yemeni who were devastated by the war and the split of Yemen. So Lebanon, I lived in Lebanon, Syria, Egypt. For me, I lived in all these countries. So you start to see how two things. Number one, how all these people have a shared struggle. And the other thing, if we don't get together, we don't strengthen each other, And that's why, we got involved in everything, you name it, we were involved in it. There was the war in Nicaragua, there was, remnant of the war, then came Afghanistan, and there was always something new that inspired us and got us involved. So, and if you think about the Palestinian, We never blame Native American for not being able to defeat the conquest, or whether it's by Spain, Portugal, the West. We always see them as like the balance of power was impossible for them. I think the Palestinians will not win the struggle against Israel by themselves because the balance of power is impossible. So we need a shift, international shift. Like I look, and I'm very impressed by some movement in this country, especially Jewish Voice for Peace, is like other people have to understand the complexity of our struggle. And I'm very, very, it's interesting that my father is from Jaffa. We were living in Jerusalem in 48, but I never suffered from poverty. I never suffered from 48, my family became refugee, but I don't remember, but like Palestine is so important for us, all Palestinian. And you have to admire a nation, people that after almost a century of oppression, they still rise, and you see it with other people, and you say, okay, South Africa, today, Black Lives Matter movement. And so I don't know, I got involved maybe because of my upbringing, the time I grew up in international solidarity, being aware of other things. So they were supporting us and we were supporting them, and we need to continue that.
Yeah, and I think we see a continuation, right, of that base building and that collaboration and that solidarity with other movements that started way before, right, our time, and we continue, and we're seeing a shift, right, in the narrative, and we are seeing other groups speaking up and speaking out and standing with the Palestinian community. So Dr. Ameri, can you in your book, you narrate about different periods of your life, and you've been touching on that a little bit here, right? The political, the social, and the personal. How did you go about organizing all of those threads in your memoir?
For me, political is personal. It is not, I didn't never separate my life. This is today I'm doing political, tomorrow I'm not. And my, coming to America as a Palestinian, I said, as a woman was, and what I faced in terms of, I never would say I've made my way, many of us made our way, but in the background, there was always that racism against us and this. And then, what I found it interesting is my husband, which we're good friends, by the way, and I love him dearly. And is that he was an activist himself, and he was well known in a community, but like our life did not there was what I call a cultural gap. And the interesting part about the cultural gap, and this to me as a sociologist is fascinating, is that how Arab American, when they came many years ago, to them preserving the culture is preserve what they brought here in this country. Like for my mother-in-law, who I love dearly, and she was the salt of the earth, the most fascinating woman. She came here when she was 3, and what you know about the old country is a small village in Lebanon in 1903. 1910 she came. And they try to, when they talk about preserving their culture, they talk about preserving that culture, the culture of village, for us, and they didn't travel back and forward. So you see the cultural gap. My mother was a working woman in Amman, Jordan. She owned her own business. So it was a cultural gap that I never thought, I thought it'll happen the other way around. So also, when you write a memoir, if you're not honest, you shouldn't write it. I mean, there's always personal thing you don't want to talk about. But if you want to talk about it, you have to be honest. Out of respect to because success is not, I think I look back at my life and I'm very satisfied. I'm happy of what, I'm content, let's say content. But that doesn't mean everything in my life was success. I struggled a lot of adjusting into this country. I come from a upper middle class, well-to-do family, highly educated. I had my master before I came here, but I didn't know how to drive. I was shocked there's no public transportation. there was, I call it the chicken and the egg. You want a job, but you don't know how to speak English. You want to take classes, you don't have a car. It's not easy. People think it's, everybody come to America and there's gold on the street, and it's not. We struggle. Immigrants struggle a lot to make it in this country. And that's important for me that people realize. They struggle on a personal level, like I was separated from my family because I fell in love with my husband. My marriage was not working. I was doing my PhD. I want political image. And there was a lot of pressure. And it was a lot of pressure. And it's not only me. Excuse me. Many immigrants experience this.
I just want to say that, as a therapist, I really appreciated your vulnerability. I appreciated your courage as you detailed, the struggles that you had as an immigrant, the challenges you faced in your first marriage, and the measures that you took, right, in coping with the isolation and the depression. I also, as a woman, I appreciated how you defied tradition, how you used your voice to uplift others in your communities. You were bold, you still are bold and fierce. And then I just, also as a second generation community organizer, I related to the political and the social struggles that you outlined, of course, coupled with the wins and the successes that you touch on in your memoir. Dr. Ameri, we have such a short period of time. Were there any challenges that arose during the writing process? And then my final question to you, in addition to that, is, without revealing too much, what can readers expect or walk away with after reading your book?
In terms of challenging, because I wrote a memoir, as I said, you have to be honest. And if you have to be honest, sometimes, like I sent this book to my ex-husband, and I would tell him what I want to share this with you. I didn't want him to edit me, have control over what I say, but I also did not want to hurt him, to say something that he find private, to say something that private. So that's a challenge. Luckily, he was okay with what I wrote, and he did not, have any problem with it. But then when I talk about Palestine Aid Society, I didn't build Palestine Aid Society. There were hundreds of volunteers. This organization was run by volunteers. Your husband is one of them. They put hours with no money. At least I was being paid for what I did. But I don't want it to sound like I did it myself, but I didn't feel I have the right, number one, to write about other people's involvement, because that's their personal life. And if I want to write about them, it is very hard. There were hundreds of people to call everybody and say, I'm going to write this about you. So I had to be honest and walk very thin line of respecting people's privacy, understanding that we live in a United States that's hostile to us, and people, I should respect that. But at the same time, I don't want people to think, well, I built this. No, I did not build it. It take a village to raise a child. It took hundreds of volunteers. And the thing that I would really like to people take away is that when you work in a community like the way I did, people think, oh, she's sacrificed, no. What I got out of, and I always say Palestine Aid Society, for me, is the gift that keeps giving. I created friends. I don't have family here, but my family is, these are my family. I got out of it much more than I gave, in terms of friendship, in terms of skills. I could have never, ever did the work for the museum, Arab American National Museum, have I not gained the experience of community organizing, of knowing people all over the country, of doing fundraising, without the work of Palestine Aid Society. So no PhD, nobody could give me the joy or the experience, the wealth of friendship that community organizing. And I am also very, very proud with our younger generation who are doing work much better than us, because we always worked on the margin of society because we were born and raised in a different culture, and we didn't understand the American society the way if you were born here, or these things. And I think, we maybe hopefully had put the seeds for them, and then and they have the skills that we really did not have the skills to operate in American society in the say this generation does. And it really, that's the best thing, the fruit that I look at the younger generation, and I'm very happy and I'm very satisfied and I'm very thankful.
Yeah, I just want to say that we stand on the shoulders of all of you, and we continue to build our wins and our successes on what you all built for us. Dr. Ameri, we can go on forever, and I want to hear more and learn more, but I want to thank you. I want to thank you for standing in your truth and for your commitment to justice. Again, to those who are watching the video or will be watching the video, I encourage you to pick up the Wandering Palestinian. Dr. Ameri, thank you so much for your time. If you're ever in the Chicagoland area, you have a home and a space with us.
I want to thank you, Suzanne, and I want to thank Troy and the Moraine Valley Community College for hosting me and for celebrating the Heritage Month.